Again, it is not their rules. It is because they are chronically underfunded and understaffed. Asking our agencies to add another task, another burden every 4 years does not help them or our people. We cannot take power away from our agencies and burden them even more and expect Georgians to be better off.
Democrats pushed back today on the Republican-led red tape rollback bill, championed by Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, calling the measure unnecessary and burdensome to state agencies already struggling with understaffing. Good evening and welcome to day 22 of Lawmakers for this legislative session. I'm Donna Lowry. We'll learn more about that bill on Capitol Hill coming up in a moment. If you're a parent of a young child, you know you're paying more for child care. Legislators want to give you a break, and we'll look at a Senate measure to do just that. Also tonight, legislative measures to get a handle on drones, including who's allowed to use them and where they're allowed to fly. Plus, what laws are needed to regulate air taxis as they travel throughout Georgia? We'll find out. But before we go any further, let's find out about the action at the Capitol from correspondent Sarah Callis.
Hi, Donna. The Senate voted on a controversial bill that promises to reduce bureaucracy for small businesses, and the House approved health bills for women and children. The Red Tape Rollback Act was debated in the Senate today. Championed by Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, SB 28 is supposed to reduce rules and regulations that impact small businesses and allow the legislature to have a say in any new rules that state agencies may want to implement.
This bill really comes from the recognition that we do have a need at all levels of government to look at our rulemaking processes, to look at the rules that are on the books, and to ensure that the rules that are on the books are still meeting their intended purposes. And very often, rules get layered on top of rules and the original intent of the rule gets lost. And so this bill is really a 5-part bill to ensure that Georgia remains the #1 state for business.
It would also require agencies to do an economic impact study of all of its rules every 4 years, and an analysis on any rule costing Georgians more than $1 million during the first 5 years of its implementation.
Part of the problem we have, Senators, is we're part of the problem. So far this year, we've introduced almost 250 pieces of legislation in this chamber. We are creating more and more legislation that creates more and more government regulations. Every day we're in this building for 40 days. That doesn't include the hundreds of bills that are coming over from the House. I would expect before we leave here this session, there'll be more than 1,000 pieces of legislation that'll get passed by both chambers. And then the governor has to scrub all of these bills and then decide, does he want to veto these bills or let them become law?
But Democrats say the bill is unnecessary, a power grab, and will hinder state agencies that are already understaffed.
It is not their rules. It is because they are chronically underfunded and understaffed. Asking our agencies to add another task, another burden every 4 years does not help them or our people. We cannot take power away from our agencies and burden them even more and expect Georgians to be better off.
This is a power grab. Plain and simple, this is DOGE coming to Georgia. And the consequences of this bill could be far, far outreaching long after we've left this General Assembly and we've left this body. Folks, this isn't about efficiency, and I thought the Republican Party stood for efficiency, not just in federal government, but state government as well. As a matter of fact, I think this extra step in the process would create, as my colleague has already said, a lot more inefficiency in state government.
The bill was passed 33-21 along party lines. In the House, members voted on 2 health-related bills. House Bill 124 would require health insurance to cover pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders and pediatric acute onset neuropathic syndrome. The bill is personal for Representative Mitchell Scoggins and his granddaughter.
My granddaughter started getting sick about 2 years ago, and we couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. And every 2 weeks, she would get sick with either a stomach bug, COVID, anything like that. She would get sick and we couldn't figure it out. She would come home with a fever with no reason. And then she would have periods where she would just throw up constantly. And we couldn't figure out what was causing it. But we finally got her diagnosed with Payne's disease. It's tough. It really is. It's tough to see your grandkids suffer. And so as we dug into this issue, we found out that insurance didn't cover this. And so that's the reason for this bill today.
The bill passed unanimously. House Bill 352 would provide continuous glucose monitors for gestational diabetes patients on Medicaid.
A continuous glucose monitor provides real-time data that helps expecting mothers maintain stable glucose levels, reducing the risk of emergency interventions and costly complications.
That bill passed 169-2. After the floor session, House Democrats held a press conference to advocate for more protections for warehouse workers with House Bill 16. The bill would require proper ventilation in warehouses, paid rest breaks, and fair productivity quotas.
It's about creating a safe and healthy workplace for working Georgians. Do we not all want that?
Lawmakers will be working in committees tomorrow in return for Legislative Day 23 on Wednesday. That's my Capitol Report. Donna?
Thanks, Sarah. Childcare is one of the largest expenses for Georgia families. The Economic Policy Institute reports the average annual cost of infant care in Georgia is $7,644 or $637 a month. For a 4-year-old, it's $6,500 or $542 a month. Compare that to other expenses, such as roughly $6,600 for college and housing at $9,700 a year. So we're going to talk about child care legislation with 2 Georgia senators. Here in the studio is Democratic Senator RaShaun Kemp of Atlanta. His committee assignments include education and youth. And joining us from the Capitol is Republican Senator Brian Strickland of McDonough. He is chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, which had a late meeting today, so we're so glad you're able to join us from the Capitol. Welcome to Lawmakers.
Thank you, Donna. Happy to be with y'all. Thank you for accommodating me tonight.
Absolutely, Chairman Strickland. I appreciate you wanting to come on the show to talk about SB 89 in the midst of your busy schedule. Tell us about it.
Yes, so SB 89 comes from a study committee I chaired last year dealing with the lack of access to affordable child care in our state. As every working parent knows and as every employer knows, one of the biggest issues we're facing in Georgia right now for our working families is finding access to child care and affording child care. So the study committee obviously found that's a big problem in our state. We started looking at what the solution could be, and there's many steps to this. The first thing we're doing with Senate Bill 89 is creating tax credits, a new tax credit for all parents with children under the age of 7, and also expanding an existing tax credit that helps with child care expenses. And lastly, speaking of employers, every employer that you talk to, if they can, they would love to offer child care for their workers. We have an existing tax credit that allows employers to get money back when they provide child care for their workers. We're expanding that eligibility for that to make sure more employers can use that in our state as well.
Can you talk a little bit about how much this measure will cost the state and how you consider it a good investment?
Yeah, so it looks like our numbers are probably around $170 million for everything right now for the whole state. But the way we look at it, for every dollar we spend here, we know it's the right thing to do to make sure that our working families don't have to sit at the kitchen table and say, does it make sense to have a career or to have a family? You should be able to do both in our state. So it's the right thing to do. But also from a financial standpoint, we know that if more people are working, more people have jobs, more people are paying taxes, you actually see more revenue in the long run.
Okay. I'm going to talk to Senator Kemp, who's right here, a little bit about it. You voted for this. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. Not only did I vote for it, I was able to arm wrestle Senator Strickland's son, Beecher, during the vote. You know, it's something that hits close to home for me. I have a 3.5-year-old, so we're paying more for daycare than we do for college. I also have a 21-year-old that's actually in college right now, so both ends of the extreme. But this is truly a kitchen table issue for me and my husband having to decide, you know, do we have another child because of the cost? You know, luckily we can afford it, but there are so many families that aren't able able to make that decision because of the burden that daycare and childcare have on their families.
And now I know this goes up to 7 years old, so it's 7 and younger. But the Democrats were looking at a different plan. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we would like to see it go up all the way to 17 because we know that, child care and other expenses do not stop when a child turns 7. So we would like to see $200 per child up to age 17. There are other initiatives that we would support in terms of just making the cost of caring for their children less of a burden on families.
Right. Chairman Strickland, it will take more than just tax credit to help parents with child care expenses. We know that. You would like to see employers receive some incentive to do more. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so with the study committee process, we obviously heard from parents, we heard from child care providers, but we also heard from business leaders that said more than ever we have less people in the workforce in our state. And this is a workforce issue. We need to make sure that more people can work that are able to work. And so it's something that I think you saw buy-in from all across the state in. And sure, there's more we can do. This is definitely a great start. Definitely something we do to help our families in our state. And Senator Kemp is right. I brought my 5-year-old, my 7-year-old on the floor of the Senate. We presented this bill. My 5-year-old, my 7-year-old, they were on winter break. And my 5-year-old likes to arm wrestle. Next thing you know, he challenged Senator Kemp, and he beat Senator Kemp twice on the floor of the Senate.
Oh, my goodness. And so, yeah, okay, I think you guys are going to need a rematch. Let's talk a little bit about what employers could do. So we want to incentivize, I guess, the employers to try to do some things within their businesses and try to actually match some of the expenses that the parents have when it comes to child care.
That's right. And there's an existing tax credit. It's a federal tax credit, but it's very limited by state law. And so we're expanding that tax credit to make sure more people can take advantage of that, more businesses can take advantage of that. But we're also adding to that so they can actually get a credit for more of those expenses. It's not something every business can afford. We understand that. But for the businesses that want to go in this direction and want to offer child care, this definitely provides more an incentive for them to do that.
And it's certainly good that the state is going to take a lead on this. I'm sorry, Senator Kemp, talk about what else you would like to see. You see pre-K as a part of this too.
Absolutely. Don't get me wrong. This is a major first step in the right direction, and so something to be very excited about. But I campaigned on the fact that we need to expand pre-K, fully fund pre-K. As I shared, my daughter's 3.5, so she'll be going to pre-K at the later part of this year, and I had to go into a lottery just like any other parent to sign her up for a slot. So I definitely think that we need to expand pre-K, get more parents the opportunity to send their child to pre-K without having that burden of cost on their shoulders.
Senator Strickland, do you agree with that pre-K, that there's more to this whole plan in terms of helping parents with child care?
Definitely. Our study committee had 2 pages of recommendations, including the expansion of pre-K in our state. So that's definitely something I'm interested in as well. This bill is not meant to be the bill that solves the problem. First off, we're acknowledging the problem, which is a very important thing. If everything going on today in the world of politics, it's important for everyone to know that we get it. You have so many of us every day now in politics that are living this as young working parents. We understand the issue, and this bill is not going to solve the problem, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
So it's passed in the Senate. How are you feeling as it goes over to the House?
I'm very optimistic. So far, this is one of those bills everybody wants to be a part of. We welcome you to the party. Welcome your support. Love to have your help in the House, making sure this bill becomes a law that's signed by Governor Kemp.
Yeah, and you feel the same way about that.
Absolutely. This is something that I think anybody can buy into because we know that this is a big burden that's on many families across the state.
One thing we didn't talk about is where the money is coming from. I know that there has been the interest in making sure it comes out of the surplus. Can you talk a little bit about that, Senator Strickland?
Well, the tax credit is actually on the revenue side, and so it's on the front end of us collecting revenue. So it's not something you actually see come out of the budget. When you talk about the cost, that's less money the state would make when you look at it from that sense. But it's not one of those things with this proposal that requires us to use any surplus funds.
Right. I apologize for that. The fact that we won't be getting the money coming in because we have a nice surplus in this state. So that's a good part of it. Anything you wanted to add?
No. I'd love for us to tap that surplus, though.
Okay, I'm sure you would. I want to thank both of you for coming on the show. I appreciate this. We'll keep up with this. Senator Strickland, thanks so much for joining us from afar. We'll have you down at the studio soon, I hope.
That's right. Thank you for having me tonight.
Okay. Coming up, we're looking to the sky and the buzz about drones and air taxis and other technology. Joining us, 2 members of the House with legislation to try to get a handle on what's flying above us. You're watching Lawmakers on GTV.
Georgia Farm Bureau, a grassroots organization dedicated to preserving Georgia agriculture. Farm Bureau advocates for all Georgia farmers at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
It's good to have everyone back together. Good news indeed. Put your feet up a minute. It's beautiful.
How does that sound, wee man?
It's what I love doing. Cup of tea.
I was thinking more a double whiskey.
Hurry up! Freshly baked biscuits, always.
Well, this is all proving rather cozy, isn't it?
Understanding the past gives a sense of the future. This is the first time that anyone has seen this in 2,000 years.
This is amazing.
Well, I'm excited now.
Pompeii is a battle against time.
You think I'm joking, but look at this. It did really happen.
Don't let anybody tell you who you are.
History teaches us to honor the past.
When you look back, you're like, wow, that was pretty special.
This is something that's actually altering the course of history.
You're charged with keeping these stories alive.
Welcome back to Lawmakers. We're going to take time now to talk about aerial technology, redefining our lives through drones and more. The company VSI Aerial describes using drones in Georgia for public safety, for agriculture, inspections, urban planning, and exterior cleaning, such as roof and window washing. And then there's the growth in urban transport, small vehicles flying from one part of the state to the other. All of it needs regulation. And joining us are 2 lawmakers moving that forward. Republican Representative Todd Jones of South Forsyth, and he chairs the House Committee on Technology and Infrastructure Innovation. Also here is Republican Representative David Clark of Beaufort, who is Vice Chair of Defense and Veterans Affairs. Welcome to Lawmakers. Chairman Jones, we're going to start with you. So we had drone technology, a bill actually passed last week to restrict how drones are used at mass gatherings. That was HB 58. So talk a little bit about Representative Gary Richardson's bill.
Sure, that's a presumptive bill. We wanted to make sure, in terms of when we're putting together a large group of people, we wanted to make sure that it's safe. We want to make sure that no one is using drones for any type of inappropriate purpose. May it be terror events, may it be, I'll say, videoing it when you're not supposed to be. You name it. We want to make sure that when people come together in Georgia, that they know that they're safe not just on the ground, but they're also safe in the sky.
Yeah, and that's one area people probably hadn't thought about. These drones are out there, and then we have these events, and so this actually defines exactly who can have the drones and where they can be, how close to people.
100%. We wanted to say, look, you need to be an FAA operator, and the drone needs to be FAA certified. And we're saying that there's going to be a 400-foot buffer within, meaning horizontally, and a 400-foot buffer above. Above 400 feet, the FAA takes over. And then on top of that, the FAA and the state of Georgia will work together on what are called temporary no-fly zones. So this is going to put I think it puts Georgia in a really good position when it comes to mass events and how drones will be legislated there.
Temporary no-fly zones for just any event that comes up, where a lot of of people are involved.
That's correct.
Yeah. So let's turn to, you have a drone bill too, HB 205, and this one deals more with Homeland Security issues, and it's making sure that Georgia has an approved list of drones. So talk about why this is important, first of all.
Yeah, I think first of all, it's just a huge national security problem and a risk that's going on. We know from at the federal government, CISA, the FBI, and the DoD, Department of Defense, they've said that it's a national security risk with the drones we have globally right now, because about 90% of the market is controlled by DJI and Autel, which is built in China and Chinese controlled. And we know that data is being able to be stored and transmitted. And we know with the Chinese government, the government demands that these companies give them the details and the data and keeping them updated with those companies. And so it's a national security risk with these drones that we have being used by our federal government and state government of them transmitting that data back.
So having an approved list, talk about what that means and what that list, who decides and who will be on that list.
So GEMA here in Georgia and Homeland Security Agency here in Georgia will put together a list by December 1, 2025. And then in 2028, 1st of January, that list will go into effect. And after that, there will be an approved list of drones that our Georgia agencies can use and operate those drones.
I think most people think when they think of the drones now that you can just go out and buy them and they should be able to do whatever they want. But that isn't the case. And it's dangerous, isn't it?
Absolutely. If you are a hobbyist, by all means, as long as you're line of sight and you can still see your drone, we're probably going to be okay. But once you go not line of sight, we need to make sure that you have the proper certification and operation. We don't want that drone landing somewhere where it's not supposed to land, for instance, on someone's head or in someone's pool or in someone's house, etc. So we need to be very, I'll say, prescriptive in terms of how it is that we're going to legislate and how drones are going to be worked.
And you had a lot of support when you brought this bill to the floor.
I did. Overwhelming support. I think it had one no vote. Besides that, it was unanimous. Besides that one no vote. And I think people realizing with this war in Ukraine that's going on, you have about 100,000 drones on the Russian side and the Ukrainian side a month going at each other. And so I think this is waking everybody up to understanding that drones can be great, and they are great, and we use them in a lot of good ways, but also we need to be looking at how they can be used in a bad way also. And so that's what House Bill 205 tackled, part of the problem.
And a few months ago, we heard in the New Jersey area, people were concerned about drones. They weren't sure where they were coming from. So this helps in terms of protection?
It definitely does. A big step forward, and it gives Georgia a voice with the federal government of collaborating, working together, because it's not just the federal government taking the lead. States need to step up also. And so this is a huge step forward. Also, we added a 3-year time for these Georgia agencies to get in compliance. They would know the list comes out, and the average lifespan of a drone is about 3 years. So I kind of was thinking also, there's a lot of agencies who have spent a lot of money on these drones. So it gives that 3-year window, and it lets the federal government knows we're working with them hand in hand on behalf of national security.
I was amazed to think of all the different agencies, thinking about the agriculture, the film industry, all the different places that are using this. So it's good that you're getting a handle on it. But I want to get into something else that's going up in the air. Chairman Jones, let's move on to the people mover type thing. So let's talk about the ones that are on the ground first. We've talked to you in the past about the unmanned shuttles, like the one at the Braves Stadium that takes people from the parking lot to the game, goes around the Battery, the Cumberland Hopper at the Battery, and extremely popular. But you're also looking at flying taxis. And so I want you to talk about those a little bit. eVTOLs.
eVTOLs. Look, we're going to take traffic off of the roads. We are going to have highways in the skies. This is, for those of us that are old enough, this is George Jetson coming to life. We're going to be one of the first states, if not the first, to put them into operation by 2026. We already have 2 vertiports on design in the Northern Arc, and we're super excited because we're going to end up with a network of what I'm going to call lily pads all around the metro area and eventually all around Georgia, literally transporting people in the sky and taking them off of the roads.
I love the way you're so excited about this, and you've been talking about this for a while, and we're finally getting there. As soon as next year, in 2026.
100%. We absolutely expect it. We got the FAA guidance in terms of where we're allowed to fly them, which is basically down state roads and federal highways. That gives us all that we need to know in order to connect the cities and connect the areas that we know Georgians want to visit vis-a-vis the sky versus just the road.
Okay, I said eVTOLs, electric vertical takeoff and landing. That's what that stands for.
Exactly.
So describe how this is going to work.
Well, if you could imagine, say you're in Alpharetta, Georgia, you're in Roswell, Georgia, there's a parking garage that conveniently is going to possibly be completely retrofitted to be a landing area. And we only need about 42,000 square feet for 3 different landing and takeoff areas. They are going to take off and land just like a helicopter, but they're going to fly horizontally like an airplane. So this allows us, we don't need runways, we don't need to create a bunch of different airports around, because that is not necessary. What's necessary is basically a landing pad, and each one of those vertiports is going to have enough electricity to charge the air taxi in about 10 minutes, and they'll have about 60 miles of range.
And then about 3 or 4 people, how many people will be in one of them?
4 people are going to be transported along, of course, with the pilot.
Okay.
We expect that'll be the start between 2026 to maybe 2030 to 2031. We expect by the mid-2030s, there will be 30 to 40 person eVTOLs that will allow you, basically, you could live 50, 60, 100 miles from where you work and literally be able to have certainty that you're at work in 30 minutes. We're super excited about all the opportunities that this is for people, but also for cargo.
I think the fascinating thing is we're going to be able to see them on our roadways. Like you go down 75 and you'll look up and they'll be there. And that is part of it too. That has to be their route, right? The interstates?
Right now we have to use the state roads and the federal roads as, I'll say, our guideposts. But as these mature and as the FAA gets more comfortable, as you may or may not know, in the air right now, we already have avenues for how airplanes fly, how helicopters fly. If you're moving south, you're moving north, etc. We're going to need to get that level of detail with the eVTOLs, because coming out of this in 2026, we might have 10 in the air, 20 in the air. But by 2030, we're going to have thousands in the air. So we need to make sure that those highways in the sky are just as safe or safer than what we have on the roads.
It really does sound like the Jeffersons. The Jetsons. The Jetsons. When it comes to that kind of stuff. So they'll be all over the place. So right now, this is putting Georgia in a good, your legislation puts Georgia in a good place when it comes to this. Explain exactly what the legislation does.
So the legislation is probably some of the shortest legislation I've ever done in terms of line numbers. But what it does is it officially puts vertiports into our statute. And what that does is that allows 2 important things to occur. 1, they can operate, which of course we need to do that in order to have the landings and the takeoff. And 2, it allows us to draw down on federal money to be able to fund the vertiports at about 90% of what the costs are. So that's super important. And that also shows that the federal government understands the importance of us having a mixed modality, may it be the autonomous vehicles or may it be the air taxis, in terms of mixing with what we're seeing already on the roads.
Let's talk safety real quick, because people are going to wonder about these flying all over the place. So how do we know that they're going to be safe?
Well, first and foremost, we have redundant systems are required inside of the air taxis, minimum of 6. One that's being developed here in Covington, Georgia, actually has 7 redundant systems. On top of that, it has a parachute for the actual eVTOL. So if God forbid there is a tragic situation, the parachute will deploy, and knock on wood, what we'll see is the eVTOL coming down at about 15 miles per hour into the ground. So those are the type of things that we're looking at in terms of what safety is going to be and how important safety is, and having the redundancy, having the parachute. And then on top of that, the air taxis that will deploy in 2026 have pilots. And wait for this, by 2030, 2031, they'll all be autonomous.
Wow, that's a lot. I know you're listening to all of this. What are your thoughts?
I'm excited about the future.
Yeah?
And getting one of these drones one day and flying up there.
You'd be okay about it. I think I'd have to watch it a little bit before I do that. We'll see. The first one will be, the first Veriports will be in
We believe in Roswell
and Alpharetta.
And
Okay.
we'd love to be able to have more operational by the World Cup in 2026.
Wow.
Yeah.
Vertiports. We're going to have to learn a whole new language.
All new language,
for all of
but
this.
it's going to be fun. And
Okay.
I know how excited you are. We're going to get you on that first test flight.
Okay. We'll see how that happens. Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for all you guys are doing, and we'll keep up with the bills in a whole bit. But that does it for Lawmakers for today. And we're actually off tomorrow because the chambers will not gavel in, but they'll spend the day holding committee hearings, and we'll tell you all about that. Join us back here on Wednesday, and we'll talk about the state list of careers in high demand in Georgia. Have a good night.